Hi, I'm Kim Brophey, applied ethologist, certified dog behavior consultant and trainer, and family dog mediator. I am also the author of Meet Your Dog and the developer of the L.E.G.S model of integrated canine science. This is the dog's truth. We've never been more committed to the dogs that we have as companions in our lives, and we've never had more professional dog trainers and behavior consultants ready to help them. And yet, behavior problems continue to go through the roof. Clearly, it's about a lot more than just dog training. When a modern pet dog has behavior problems, our society generally offers two possible explanations for why those behavior problems might be occurring. One, that it's a bad dog, that there's something wrong with the dog. They might be untrained, disobedient, naughty, or simply a bad seed. And then the other possible explanation is that it's the owner's fault, either the person who raised the dog or the person who is currently the steward of the dog. We imagine that it must be something that they did wrong, whether they didn't socialize the dog well enough, didn't train them well enough, or possibly they were even abusive or negligent. And so both of these explanations seem to be the things that we go back and forth between whenever a dog is having behavior problems, and then we set about dog training as the solution to those problems. But what if I told you that there was a third explanation, the real explanation of why so many dogs are struggling with behavior problems in the 21st century? There are things that you need to know as a dog-loving family in the modern age about the dog that you have in your life now, or the one that you were thinking about bringing into your home. Starting today, you're going to have an entirely new perspective and understanding about your dog, and it starts now. Here's something we don't generally consider. Behavior problems rarely occur in nature. Because behavior problems can't afford to occur in nature, they're selected against through the process of natural selection. Because of the need for an animal to be successful in their environment in order to survive and reproduce, there's really not a lot of room for behavioral dysfunction in the gene pools. So stop and think for a moment about the incredible prevalence of behavior problems that we're seeing in our modern dog population, and consider just how extraordinarily unnatural that actually is. When it comes to our dogs, we've really only had half the story, and that's part of the problem. We've been only focusing on two basic elements out of the four main elements of any given animal's legs. You see, all species on Earth have what's called a phenotype. A phenotype is the collection of variables that contributes into making every animal, every species on Earth, what they are. First, they have the genetics that they bring to the table from the day that they're born, inherited from prior generations as the successful traits that have worked in that particular environment. And then that environment, they are meant to fit like a key to a lock, a particular niche in an ecosystem and habitat, perfectly fit to those conditions. So as an individual self, navigating life's terrain from the moment that they're born with the internal conditions of their sex and age and health, nutrition, medical issues, etc., they're then learning and adapting in those conditions to constantly improve the outcome for themselves as well as subsequent generations. But when it comes to our dogs, we've acted as if they're the exception to all of natural law, almost like they're not even biological animals. So as a result, we've neglected this critical relationship between the environment and the genetics that every species on Earth needs to be relying on in order to be behaviorally healthy. I think sometimes because our dogs are domesticated and artificially selected, we imagine that these rules don't apply to them, but they actually do, and then some. Because when we artificially selected dogs for very specific behavioral functions throughout history in very particular kinds of environments and conditions, we created even more specialized keys for more specialized locks, most of which we don't have available anymore in our modern world. We all grew up in a world where dog equals pet. But for 10 to 40,000 years, a dog did not equal pet. Some dogs were, yes, bred to be pets, but most dogs were not. Most dogs were actually very carefully selected to perform specific jobs throughout history. And those behaviors that we bred them for, that are still present in those breeds of dogs that we have preserved today, are what we often experience as behavior problems in our modern dog population. In addition, the lack of ability for many dogs to express these natural instincts that we bred into them creates a host of welfare issues for our dogs, as they are unable to follow through on the instincts that they carry in their blood. This doesn't really make a lot of sense to most of us. We can't imagine how our pet dogs living in loving homes could possibly have welfare issues. But welfare is about much more than an animal's basic needs being met. Welfare is also about behavioral and psychological wellness. And that is what we need to start talking about when it comes to our pet dogs in the 21st century. What does that look like? What does that mean? Well, we've been studying other animals in captivity, other domesticated and wild species living in zoos and on farms or in laboratories for decades now. And we've come to appreciate certain phenomena that occur for these animals when they are kept in captivity outside of their natural habitat. And those same implications apply to our dogs. But wait, am I saying that our dogs are captive animals? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Most of us don't remember a time before this because we're so entrenched in the way that we keep pets in the 21st century now. But the truth is, even in my childhood, growing up in a major United States city, most of the dogs were still loose. So even though they were our family pets and companions on the one hand, On the other hand, they had autonomy to follow through with all of the natural behaviors and instincts that we humans have selectively bred them for over the years. Now, obviously, we're not just going to unleash all of our dogs. We feel a responsibility to keep them properly contained for community safety and respect of neighbors and for the dog's own health. However, we need to come to terms with the repercussions of our new constrictive environments as we are keeping our dogs as captive animals. And while the kinds of behavior problems will differ from species to species in captivity, a lot of the kinds of behavior problems already observed in other species in captivity are the same kinds of behavior problems we observe in our pet dogs. Frustration, aggression, anxiety, depression, overarousal, neurotic and stereotypical behaviors, compulsions. All of these things are hallmarks of what is called zoochosis in animals in zoos and on farms exhibiting this kind of behavioral dysfunction. And that same concept applies to our dogs. Pet madness syndrome is all too common in the 21st century in the modern pet dog population. And it's going to need our help and intervention if we're going to solve the problems at their source. In nature, when an animal or species finds that their legs are out of balance, they have two mechanisms available to them to solve that problem in order to better cope with their world and be successful. One, the individual can adapt to the conditions in the environment. They can literally learn to behave differently. Now, they're limited in that depending on the design of the organism and the genetic structure and the sense capabilities and the instincts that they're armed with. But they do have the option when they're autonomous and they're free to make their own decisions about their own behavior that would give them the opportunity to adapt to changed conditions or conditions that otherwise don't suit them well. They also, as part of that adaptive option, are able to migrate. So they could change their conditions by literally relocating. And the species has that second option of adapting generationally. So if there are individuals in the population that are coping with these new circumstances in an environment better than others, then those individuals will be selected for. And then the ones who aren't coping as well won't survive, and their genes will not be passed on to the next generation. So what that means is that the animal over time, if not imminently, will be able to adapt to those changed conditions. That's nature's process of checks and balances. Here's the thing about our dogs. When it comes to our dogs, we've handicapped both of those natural mechanisms for our dogs being able to better adapt to this rapidly changing modern world. One, they don't have the option of free will because of captivity. So they can't really change their behavior in ways that will be helpful and functional for them to better cope with their conditions. They don't have the option of migrating, right? They can't move, they can't leave because of captivity. And so they can't improve their relationship to their conditions and rebalance their legs that way either. And then lastly, because of artificial selection and spaying and neutering, in other words, us deciding what gets passed on to the next generation, nature is not able to solve the problem for the species over time, over generations. And what this means is that the problem is slowly getting worse, generation by generation, with each generation possibly less equipped than the generation before to handle the modern circumstances that we have. We're going to have to get creative and find new ways of understanding and solving these problems that go far beyond dog training. And while the solutions are going to look different for every individual dog, as they each have their own unique recipe of legs, the first step for all of us in helping our dogs to cope better with the modern world that they've found themselves in as captive animals and keys no longer fitting in our locks is to understand their legs. In this next section, we're going to talk about the legs of a given modern dog. First, we're going to talk about the learning, the experiences and education that a dog has in their life. Then we're going to talk about the environment, the external conditions of a dog's world. Next, we'll talk about genetics and the 10 distinct working groups of dogs. Then we'll talk about the self, the internal unique conditions of each individual. At the end, you will have a much clearer understanding of the legs that your dog or the dog that you're thinking about getting might have. and things that you can do to help support them and ensure that their legs are balanced optimally. Working, furthermore, with a family dog mediator will help you find meaningful, creative, and insightful solutions to common problems that professionals experience as trainers and consultants. For most of us, when we think about learning in our dogs, we think about dog training. We think about the few moments a day that we might take to teach them a new skill or trick, or maybe the hour a week that we're spending in a dog obedience class. But the truth is that learning is happening all the time, 24/7, 365 for every organism on the planet, because learning is an elemental component of those legs, as we've been talking about, helping animals adapt to changing conditions, recognizing meanings, learning new meanings, and also operating with new behavioral strategies in changing conditions as they age and develop through their life. So, when we think about learning and we're focusing our emphasis on obedience and compliance to commands, and we're changing and modifying behavior towards the ends that we would like without consideration to how that might be valuable or not for the dog, we can really be playing with fire. You see, the fact that humans have gotten so good at training animals means that we have a lot of power in our hands to effectively change their behavior, but we shouldn't always be changing their behavior. If we can't make a case for how a certain learning experience is going to benefit our dog's legs in the ultimate aim of balancing their legs for their better welfare, then we should think twice about teaching it to them. That's a filter we need to be seeing things through. Moving away from this model of dog obedience training and the whole concept of compliance to commands is going to be very important in the future in our lives with dogs if they are to be healthy behaviorally and successful and happy. It is our responsibility as their guides to teach them how to cope better in this world. They are dependents on us, whether they like it or not. And so the responsibility is on our shoulders to show them the kinds of things that are going to work best for them and to help them understand the meanings of the things that are in their world.
Also, all of that learning that a dog has had irregardless of our efforts to influence their experiences and learning purposefully, in other words, the ideas and feelings, responses and habits that they've picked up throughout their life, will have significant influence on the behaviors we might observe. Just like us, dogs acquire countless take-home messages from the school of life, and often behave in ways that reflect whatever prior precedents of meanings and outcomes they have learned in the past. These lessons can range from small and trivial, like piecing together the fact that your hiking shoes coming out of the closet predict a fabulous day on the trail, to profoundly significant, as in cases of traumatic life experiences of one form or another. Finding a qualified professional trainer, consultant, or family dog mediator with a background and experience in the science of animal learning and training can really help to identify the kinds of ideas and habits that your dog has formed and modify them when appropriate and helpful to do so.
When it comes to understanding the legs of a modern pet dog, the role of the environment cannot be overstated. We're not in Kansas anymore, and our dogs are having a really difficult time in the 21st century. You see, the rate of environmental change that has occurred on Earth in the last 100 years is unprecedented. Most of the things that are elemental to our modern lives weren't here 100 years ago. Cars, computers, cell phones, the internet, social media, skyscrapers, airplanes, helicopters. Most of the things that we take for granted as just the world as we know it are entirely new. A lot of the things that are in our modern environment that we just expect our dogs to roll with the punches about are really stressful. 100 years ago, because we didn't have things like cell phones and cars and the internet, we didn't have the volume of just mere traffic in our lives that we do now. Whether that's in our house and kids coming over for slumber parties, or service persons coming over to fix our appliances, landscapers in our yards, friends coming over for an afternoon tea or a glass of wine. The volume of the traffic that we have in our lives is so much greater than it was before. Even in our front yards and in our neighborhoods, in the cities that we're living in, the number of individuals and the number of vehicles that our dogs are having to constantly navigate is much higher than it was in the past. And simply the sensory information, the auditory information, the smells, the sights, the feelings, the sensations that our dogs are trying to process are just at a magnitude they've never been before. They don't have the benefit either, like we do, of understanding what these things mean. They're simply scary and make our dogs feel like they're kind of on an alien planet sometimes. In addition to all of that just general chronic overwhelmment that many of our dogs are experiencing, we also have to remember that this overstimulating world is accidentally arousing our dogs into a lot of the behaviors that they were selected for historically. But we don't want them to exhibit those behaviors, and we keep them confined on leashes and behind fences to prevent disasters from occurring when our dog accidentally hunts or protects us from the wrong individuals in the neighborhood. But that creates a lot of problems for our dogs too, because they're constantly being stimulated to engage in these instincts that they still carry in their blood, because we still are preserving all of these breeds that we romanticize historically. Even though we don't want those behaviors in our lives and as our pets anymore, we still have those instincts preserved in the gene pool of our modern pet dogs. So for them, it can be really overstimulating and stressful to be aroused into all of these actions that A, they aren't allowed to engage in, and B, if they did try to engage in those behaviors, they would probably be punished for doing so. Add to that frustration the experience of chronic cabin fever that any one of us would have if we spent the vast majority of our time confined indoors without the option to go outside, stretch our legs, connect with friends, and do what we would like or feel the urge to do. That's captivity. That loss of freedom can be a real recipe for crazy making, even if we have all of our basic needs met. All we have to do is to remember what it was like for us in periods of lockdown during COVID to be reminded of the frustration and mental health problems that this can create. A luxury cruise ship can become an instant prison when we suddenly get stranded at sea and can't get off that boat. And the modern pet world can be accidentally the same kind of infuriating nightmare for our dogs if we're not careful to ensure they have sufficient relief through adventures and experiences on shore on a regular basis. We also really need to take a good look at our modern pet dog social environments, because those have become a lot more complicated in the 21st century as well. Many dogs might feel like they're living in a reality TV house show as they find themselves cohabitating with individual humans and animals that they themselves did not decide to live with. That can create a lot of additional pressures. And all the while, our expectations for their tolerance and friendliness towards all of these social members continues to increase quite unrealistically. Also, those social members in the primary home might be changing at a higher rate than they did in the past. That can create a lot of stress and dysfunction, as dogs might not understand why our family members are changing. We also have very different schedules and routines that often do change as we shift from job to job or we move from home to home. Those kinds of transitions can be really difficult for our dogs, especially as they're trying to navigate all of the social conditions within. And of course, for the dogs who find themselves bouncing from home to home as they don't suit one set of conditions and are thought to possibly better succeed in another, which often is the case, they can still carry a lot of trauma and stress with them about the loss of the bonds they've had in the past and the struggle to build new ones in new conditions. When thinking about solutions for our dogs in the modern environment, we need to first be thinking about the changes and adjustments we can make to the environment to create less friction for our dogs. Thinking about them as a square peg in a round hole. What can we do to stretch the size of that round hole to make room for those square pegs so that we don't have the friction and our dogs aren't experiencing the frustration that they are? Hopefully by now you've come to appreciate how important the differences between the kinds of dogs actually are. As we have so many square pegs in our population of pet dogs in the 21st century, struggling to fit into the conditions of the round hole of the pet environment. So we will take a deep dive into the 10 distinct genetic working groups of dogs so you can appreciate some of the possible pros and cons that you might find in living with them. If you don't know what kind of dog you have, we highly suggest that you get a genetic test to make that determination, as it's going to be very important for you in your understanding and relationship with your dog going forward. You can also use our software program, the Dog Key, which is available for free online, to help you make the determination about what the primary genetic group in your dog might be. One way to think about the importance of these differences, in stark contrast to what we've been told that it's all how you raise them, is that while dogs do share certain characteristics across the board, the differences between them are critical. One of my favorite analogies is the ball analogy, and I think this really helps to shed a lot of light on why subtle differences can be so important. The ball analogy is thinking about all the different kinds of balls that we have in sports. We have soccer balls, we have tennis balls, billiard balls, golf balls, basketballs, volleyballs, all kinds of balls. They're all round and they roll, and we play sports with all of them. But we can imagine really quickly just how important those differences are when we think about something like taking a bowling ball to a soccer game or trying to play tennis with a billiard ball. Clearly, the differences in dimension and in weight and in structure and density, all of those things are powerful agents in how well our sports are going to go. And the same thing is true for the differences between our dogs. However, it's really important that you remember a dog's genetics are not predictive of their behavior for a number of reasons. First, genetic diversity and mutations create constant variability in the gene pool, even in purebred dogs. Though it's important to be prepared for the increased likelihood that your dog might exhibit certain behavioral traits baked into the cookie of his historical design so that you can make the best decisions for his life and environment and avoid surprising disappointments you weren't prepared for, remember that there are going to be plenty of dogs that break the mold and fail to perform as originally intended. Also, your dog's genetics are just one element of their unique recipe of L.E.G.S, and so are constantly being qualified by the other factors of learning, environment, and the individual self. So avoid the temptation to think that a dog's genetics will guarantee that they will or won't exhibit a certain behavior or trait associated with their ancestry. Just keep it in mind as a point of reference for setting your expectations, provisions, and outlets for meeting his needs in the modern pet world. So enjoy this next section as you learn about all the different kinds of dogs in the gene pool, and we remember together as a culture the history that we've shared with dogs over hundreds and thousands of years.
Examples of the natural dog group include Akita, Basenji, Chow Chow, Norwegian Elkhound, Alaskan Malamute, and the Siberian Husky. These first dogs of the world, the basal breeds, are representative of the first evolutionary step away from their ancestral wolves. They're less domesticated and thus maintain many of the behaviors of their ancestors, like strong predation and self-preservation, though still far more companionable to men than wild animals. They express the same elemental kinds of useful behaviors to men that would later be developed into more specific working groups, though not nearly as specialized and refined, aiding men with tracking, hunting, guarding, herding, alerting, etc., that were later developed into more specific working groups. You'll fall in love with a natural dog because they're a free spirit. You will revere their intuitive, instinctual, unchained, wild nature. They're independent. They're not clingy, demanding, obsessive, or needy. They're logical. They have more common sense than many of the people you know. But you might find a natural dog hard to live with because they can be suspicious. They have a strong sense of self-preservation, and they're discerning and cautious. They're instinctual. Their wilder impulses can range from inconvenient for you to quite serious. They're self-preserving. They can be difficult to train, confine, and handle as a pet. So you might find yourself seeking professional help for predatory behavior toward other animals, especially smaller ones, not coming when called, wandering, running away, difficulty being confined to crates, rooms, yards, etc., intolerance of being handled and restrained, at home, at the vet, at the groomers, wariness and defensiveness towards strangers, destructive behavior in indoor environments, or difficulty following directions or responding to training. So remember, to be successful with a natural dog, you want to respect their primitive, wild roots of their genetic instincts for hunting, protection, and self-preservation. Some examples of the Sighthound group are Saluki, Greyhound, Borzoi, Afghan Hound, and the Irish Wolfhound. Artificially selected for the job of hunting, Sighthounds originated in Africa and were developed in ancient Egypt and the Middle East. They're one of the oldest groups of specialized dogs. They were the first group of dogs to be refined for their incredible ability to perceive prey at a distance and remarkable speed at acquiring it. They developed uniquely narrower skull shapes due to the selection for increased peripheral vision, scanning sensitivity from movement. You might fall in love with a Sighthound because they're elegant. They're naturally inclined to appreciate the finer things in life, like warmth and comfort. They're also reserved, generally quiet and calm, and unobtrusive and stoic. Their affection and play can also be delivered with grace, passion, and sincerity, even if they are reserved. You might, however, find a Sighthound hard to live with because they can be sensitive. They're not cut out for harsh conditions, great endurance, invasiveness, or rough play. They're also a flight risk. They have a keen eye for prey and the instincts to hunt it down with sudden swiftness. They're also self-directed. Doting on you or following your directions, particularly come, is often not their top priority. So, you might find yourself seeking professional help for predatory behavior towards other animals, not coming when called, their independent nature regarding your directions and requested obedience, discomfort with small children and sudden invasiveness of personal space, and occasional wariness of strangers or protectiveness of territory and family. If you're going to enter into a relationship with a Sighthound, remember not to take their design for granted. Their passion for independent hunting and sprinting after critters are simply in their DNA. Examples of guardian dogs are Anatolian Shepherd, Bull Mastiff, Cane Corso, English Mastiff, Great Dane, Great Pyrenees, and the Greater Swiss Mountain Dog. Artificially selected for the job of guarding, guardians date back to at least 1100 BC in ancient China, with some arguing their existence as far back as the Stone Age. These large, brave dogs were used to protect herds from predators and property from perpetrators, and were later employed by the Romans and other European empires in the battlefield and conquest of new territories. They were also used for some of the earliest blood sport entertainment, pitting as gladiators of sorts against other large animals by the Romans. You might fall in love with a guardian because they're cool. Level-headed and mellow, reserved and chivalrous, they have a low-maintenance demeanor about them. They're also tolerant. They're gracious and gentle and patient with other human and animal social members. They're protective, and they'll surely make you feel safer home alone or walking down the street. But you might find a guardian hard to live with because they can be really opinionated. Discerning and independent of mind, a guardian may be resistant to your instructions. They can also be suspicious. They can be unwelcoming to those they perceive as threats to the home and loved ones. They're also big, so their size and strength may feel a bit impractical to manage at times. You might find yourself seeking professional help for aggression towards unfamiliar people or animals, especially near your home or property, wandering off, not coming when called, protectiveness of owners or other pets, territorial barking, difficulty in training, resistance to following directions, and male-to-male conflicts. If you want to succeed in life with a guardian, you need to remember his genetic propensity for action when it comes to protecting his home and family. Some examples of the toy dog group are Papillon, Maltese, Pomeranian, Pug, Toy Poodle, and Shih Tzu. Toy dogs were artificially selected for the job of sociability. These genetic dwarves of the dog world were a companion of the aristocracy in medieval and Renaissance Europe, as well as to Buddhist monks and emperors in China and Tibet. Used for everything from a heating pad to a flea magnet and alarm system, these little dogs found their way into a special place in human history, our lap. You might fall in love with a toy dog because they're sensitive, intuitive, and emotional. They're designed for attending to and comforting their person. And they're engaging. They're fun-loving, playful, and curious with family and friends. And they're also practical. Highly portable, they're easier to care for, manage, and satisfy than many other dogs. But you might find a toy dog hard to live with because they're a little codependent. The lapdog's clinginess and demands for attention can be challenging. They can also be wary. Toy dogs may be prone to alarm barking and defensiveness in new conditions. They're fragile, so bad weather, exercise, work, injury, or stress can easily put them over the edge. So you might find yourself seeking professional help for things like separation anxiety, house soiling, and difficulty in house training, their perception of stranger danger at home and in public, protectiveness of their person, also known as lap guarding, difficulty with small children, excessive barking, handling and grooming intolerance, and reactivity and dramatic behavior towards other dogs. So if you want to be successful with a toy dog, cherish, but be careful not to encourage their genetic propensity for dependence on you. It's sweet, but can get blown way out of proportion and become a bit of a mess. Examples of the scent hound group include Basset Hound, Bloodhound, Beagle, English Foxhound, Plot Hound, and the Treeing Walker Coonhound. Artificially selected for the job of hunting, they're a derivative of the guardian dogs. The first scent hounds, dating back to the Middle Ages, were especially skillful tracking mastiff-type dogs were further developed for their olfactory capabilities, passionate and persistent commitment to following a scent track, and hardiness in rough conditions. Over generations, they were selected for the mark, the bay behavior, a call to arms upon locating the desired track of the target and holding an animal at bay. You'll fall in love with a scent hound because they're social. They're generally very outgoing and friendly with people and other dogs. They're emotional. They wear their passionate heart on their sleeve about everything, from you to squirrels. And they're fun. They can be hilarious, playful, social, creative, and adventurous. But you might find a scent hound hard to live with because they can be impulsive. A naturally ambitious dog, they can tune out the entire world and everyone in it when they're on their game. And they're hunters. Their blind and deaf determination for sniffing out, tracking, and pursuing targets can be annoying and even quite dangerous to other animals. And they're dramatic. They're born to bay their little heart out when life gets exciting. So you may feel like you're watching a pop talent reality TV show at times. You might find yourself seeking professional help for excessive barking, predatory behavior towards other animals, failure to come when called, unmanageability on leash when stimulated by other animals, emotional act first, think later reactions to threats to space, safety, or other resources, and difficulty with confinement to smaller spaces and indoor living. So remember to keep in mind that they have an impulsive and emotional genetic nature for pursuit if you want to be successful with a scent hound. Examples of the gun dog group include Cocker Spaniel, German Shorthair Pointer, Golden Retriever, Irish Setter, Labrador Retriever, Standard Poodle, and Vizsla. Artificially selected for the job of bird hunting with humans, gun dogs represent a significantly more complicated leap in refined genetic selection, perfected in order to hunt hard-to-reach fowl. Hunting birds presented some technical difficulty, and people needed a dog who could work more closely and more delicately at our side in an effort of true partnership, with the ability to locate and expose prey, but not attempt to kill or damage our catch. We first used falconry and then later guns to bring down the birds. So you might fall in love with a gun dog because they're enthusiastic. They're generally eager and willing to get on board with whatever the day brings. They're cooperative. A team player at heart, they're made to be an attentive, trainable, and responsive partner in life. And they're outgoing. They have an extroverted spirit both with other people and with animals. But you might find a gun dog hard to live with because they're active. While their ambition for athleticism is admirable, their physical needs can be a little intense at the end of a long day. They're immature. the very same silly puppy nature that makes them so playful can also manifest in annoying traits such as short attention span, neediness, impulsivity, foolishness, or insecurity. And they're doting. Though many of us adore the endless affections of our dogs, you may find them a little heavy on the PDA if you really value your personal space. So you might find yourself seeking professional help for distractibility and impulsivity, overwhelming greeting behavior with people such as jumping and licking, destructiveness to home or personal belongings, hyperactivity or restlessness, sensitivity to loud noises and storms, problematic oral fixations including incessant ball pushing for yet another round of fetch, and the I'll never grow up Peter Pan complex. In order to be successful with a gun dog, remember to fulfill their genetic craving for partnership and adventure through games, sports, and outings. Examples of the terrier group include Cairn Terrier, Fox Terrier, Jack Russell Terrier, Wheaton Terrier, West Highland Terrier, and the Yorkshire Terrier. Terriers were artificially selected for the job of hunting and resource guarding. Courageous to the point of insanity. That was what humans needed in order to rid our settlements from everything from rats to foxes to badgers. Since the 1300s, terriers have been employed to smoke out and eradicate little critters with unrelenting perseverance and have played an important role in history as our original pest control solution. You'll fall in love with a terrier because they're dynamic. They have big, fun, bold, and witty personalities. They're independent. They aren't particularly clingy, and they know how to self-entertain. And they're always ready. At the drop of a hat, they're poised for action. But you might find a terrier hard to live with because they have a one-track mind. When they set their sights on something, you may be invisible to them. And they've got a little thing for little critters. They can be dangerous to animals that they confuse with vermin. They're also hyperactive. You may wonder if they have ADHD due to the amount of energy they have. So you might find yourself seeking professional help for difficulty following directions, dramatic or unmanageable behavior when walking on leash, excessive barking in the house or yard, mischief and troublemaking, predatory behavior towards animals, obsessive spinning, tail chasing, or other preoccupations with toys or things like the television, competitiveness or bossiness with other dogs in the home. So remember, if you want to be successful with a terrier, you'll need to manage their genetic impulses and be very cautious when they're around small animals in light of their historical design. Examples of the Bulldog group include American Bulldog, American Staffordshire Terrier, English Bulldog, French Bulldog, Bull Terrier, and Pit Bull Terrier. Artificially selected for the job of entertainment, British broadmouth Mastiff-type dogs who trace their ancestry back to the large Roman guardians once used for gladiator entertainment were then specialized for the strange sport of bull baiting, bringing down a bull in contest in England, a cruel version of the original blood sport for the benefit of human entertainment in the 16th century. Terriers were crossbred with these bulldogs in order to increase their tenacity and gameness. You might fall in love with a bulldog because they're affectionate. They're naturally engaging, tolerant, and endearing with people. They're entertaining. Whether high octane or low, they're a naturally amusing character. Their brave and gregarious approach to life can also be a total blast, as they're super outgoing. You might find a bulldog hard to live with, though, because they're all or nothing. A 0 to 60 design can catch you off guard at times. They're powerful. Their strength and force can overwhelm people and other animals. They're touchy-feely. If you value your personal space, they may get on your nerves, as well as your lap. So you might find yourself seeking professional help for destructive behavior, especially when left alone or unsupervised, incredible power and unmanageability, excitability on leash, especially around other animals, overenthusiastic behavior toward people, jumping, mouthing, roughhousing, protectiveness of one or more family members toward other people and animals, inflicting severe injuries on other animals in altercations due to their strength, though not necessarily starting such altercations, and general overarousal in any number of high stimulation circumstances. So, to be successful with a bulldog, remember to take steps to keep his system in its natural low gear so that his genetic high arousal response to excitement doesn't get the better of him. Examples of the herding dog group include Border Collie, Australian Shepherd, Cardigan Welsh Corgi, Standard Collie, Shetland Sheepdog, German Shepherd, and Belgian Malinois. Artificially selected for the job of herding dogs date back as far as 55 BC and have continued to be specialized ever since. As soon as humans domesticated livestock, we needed help controlling it and moving the animals in an organized fashion in pursuit of grazing areas, sometimes over great distances. This asked a great deal of a dog, to work closely but intensely alongside a shepherd in order to accomplish the necessary tasks without unmanageable harassment, much less killing of the animals. Some breeds were further specialized and differentiated for human herding. You'll fall in love with a herding dog because they're a Robin to your Batman. Ready to heed the call for any mission on the horizon, they will not rest as long as there is an adventure to be had. They're attentive. They're keenly aware of their environment as well as their partner's emotions and instructions. And they're responsible. This type A personality keeps their I's dotted and their T's crossed with rules, routines, work, and games. But you might find a herding dog hard to live with because they can be bossy. They're a regulator, here to establish law and order by managing the living room, neighborhood, park, and natural universe. They're a workaholic. Their mental and physical ambition can make them overwhelming and exhausting at times, especially if you have a quiet indoor lifestyle. And they're clingy. Their otherwise adorable person focus can be a little on the unhealthy side. So you might find yourself seeking professional help for chasing fast-moving objects like cars, bikes, skateboards, joggers, cats, and children, controlling behavior towards other pets or family members, possibly manifesting as threats or aggression, sensory hypersensitivity to lights, shadows, sounds, and motion, excessive barking at events, at their environment, and at people and animals, nipping the feet or legs of people and animals, protectiveness of territory and social members, threatening or aggressive behavior towards visitors, hyperactivity, agitation, or restless behavior, overexcitement, threatening or aggressive appearing displays toward other animals, people, bikes, cars, etc., and neurotic, repetitive, and obsessive behaviors in OCD, such as spinning, tail chasing, retrieving, circling, and barking. So remember, if you want to be successful with a herding dog, prepare yourself for their genetics to micromanage the natural world. The world dog is a dog by nature's design. The world dog is exactly that, what the world creates without any human intervention at all. Making up 80% of the world's dog population, these dogs have developed through natural selection or are now watered-down versions of our own selections, as nature drives the adaptations to circumstances in a changing world shared with humans. They are, quintessentially, the real dogs in the truest sense of the word. You might fall in love with a world dog because they're flexible, adaptive to change, they go with the flow, and they're at home in many environments. They're practical, they're observant, self-sufficient, undemanding, low maintenance, and efficient. They're good-natured, they're tolerant, solicitous, cooperative, docile, and level-headed. But you might find a world dog hard to live with because they can be an opportunist. They're a trash scavenging and poop-eating machine, their essence being that of the original opportunistic dog looking for leftovers of any kind. They've got your number. Your world dog is a human behavior expert who is reading and watching your every move. And they're self-serving. Their agenda and interest is their job. Working for you is not. And they tend to have trouble with captivity as a result. You might find yourself seeking professional help for peeing in the house, chewing on things that don't belong to them, getting on your furniture, barking at the neighbor's cats, stealing sandwiches off the coffee table, jumping on people, pulling on leash, and generally having their own agenda that may or may not involve following your directions. Given the popularity of adopting dogs from other countries in the 21st century and rescuing dogs that are living on the streets or in villages as strays, It's important for you to consider the kind of trauma it can cause a dog to be displaced from all that they know. So if you want to be successful with a world dog, recognize that they're going to learn what things mean for them, what works for them, and act accordingly.
Every dog is an individual, quite because of their legs, not despite them. That 1 in a million dog that we know, that's our family member, our companion, is completely unique. There are no two alike on the face of the planet. And the internal conditions and world for our dogs are important factors and when it comes to understanding and influencing their behavior and welfare. Every dog has their own particular personality, their likes, their dislikes, and what's called their Umwelt, that internal world and qualitative experience as a sentient being that they're having in life, just like us. Those things should not be diminished, and we need to meet our dog with the unique recipe that they have in their own legs, exactly where they are. There are 6 general categories to this internal world for our dogs. First of all, their age. How old our dog is can be a really important variable when it comes to their behavior. Young dogs, puppies, are going to be in a critical developmental period and be absorbing all of their experiences like sponges, more socially flexible and less socially competitive. And then suddenly when they hit adolescent, we can feel like we have a totally different dog in our lives and in our homes. As just like with any other species, they start experiencing new kinds of perceptions and behaviors that they themselves didn't ask for nor intend to express. So that's very important in our understanding. Also, as our dogs age, their behavior can shift in different ways as well as they hit social maturity. And then new instincts seem to turn on suddenly that weren't there before when they were juveniles. And then as our dogs hit senior years, their behavior can become different in important ways as well, as they might experience decreased faculties cognitively and physically that can cause some serious stress and problems, and of course then changes in behavior. One of the other variables of the internal conditions of the self that can affect our dog's behavior, and often does, is sex and reproductive status. We know this is a driving force in humans and a driving force in every other species, and the same is true for dogs, even though few of them actually have any kind of sex life. But still, especially with brains that are dominated by the olfactory cortex, smelling things, all of those hormones, those pheromones and signals in the environment with other animals can really influence their behavior. So once an animal is sexually mature, so they've passed the point of adolescence, whether or not they are intact or spayed or neutered can have a huge influence not only on their behavior, but even the behavior of other animals as they are interpreting that information of that individual's sexual and reproductive status. Also, nursing mothers, pregnant mothers, those kinds of situations are going to create a lot of behavioral change and additional factors that we have to consider as well, as all kinds of different instincts like protectiveness, etc., can come into play. Regardless of where your dog is in their sexual status and their reproductive status, you need to keep these things in mind when it comes to appreciating and understanding your dog's behavior. The third factor of the self that can definitely influence our dog's behavior is their health. We all know that how we feel really has an influence on how we behave, and our dogs are no exception. Most dogs hide pain a lot better than people, though, so a lot of the times we don't appreciate that they might be experiencing either acute or some kind of chronic pain. There's actually been a lot of research in the last few years that has shown a relationship between chronic pain in dogs and all kinds of anxiety and aggressive related behaviors. So it's important that we take good stock to ensure that our dogs are in optimal health at all times. One thing to consider in this is, of course, that some dogs are genetically predisposed to health problems, and we definitely should, as a culture, consider whether or not certain types of dogs should be continued to be bred if they do inherit, as a matter of almost normalcy, certain kinds of genetic issues that can create chronic health problems throughout their lives. The next big component of the self is nutrition. We've all heard that you are what you eat, and our dogs are no exception. Many dogs have allergies to certain proteins and other ingredients popular in dog foods, as well as have difficult time processing digestively certain kinds of foods. It's important that you learn about and find a diet that is going to suit your dog optimally for their overall health and welfare, as we all know that digestive issues or other issues with foods not agreeing with our bodies can cause a whole lot of issues. The fifth main element of a given dog's self is disability. One of the things about disability that we don't often think about is that disability is something that doesn't occur as often in nature. So animals are less equipped to be able to handle disabilities when they arise, meaning they tend to feel more vulnerable socially and behaviorally if they do have a disability, because in nature, the disability would definitely mean that they were in greater danger than their social counterparts. So when we have a dog that is handling some type of disability, whether that's something that they were born with or something that happened at some point during their life, we need to be mindful of the fact that they might be more sensitive, more defensive, more anxious, or fearful of other conditions and social players in their environment as a result. The last factor of the self is the individual. Every individual is having their own unique experience in their life. Dogs are no exception to this. Because every dog is an individual, it could be that they seem to defy all of the logic of L.E.G.S, and every once in a while that happens. No matter what kind of learning experiences we provide our dog, we may be unable to change their perceptions or their behaviors in certain conditions. No matter what kind of environmental situation we put our dog in and provide for them, it may fail to meet their environmental needs. A dog could also completely be the exception to the genetic intended design that their ancestors were created for. So it's really important that we always make room for the fact that at the end of the day, they're going to be an individual. As a result of that, we need to also recognize that they aren't static, right? They are not just this formula of variables. They can be influenced and affected by things that we don't understand and they don't understand at all. Simply, they might just have good days and bad days, or even wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We all know that we can be subject to all sorts of things in our own behavior that are beyond our own comprehension, understanding, and intention. And the same can be true for our dogs. So always remember to make room for the fact that they are going to be who they are as an individual as you include the understanding of L.E.G.S in your relationship and your efforts to work with their behavior. And here's how to get those legs moving for you and your dog. When it comes to your dog's learning, help him have experiences and education that help him cope better in his world, rather than focusing on having him just learn to be obedient to your commands. With the environment, remember that your dog is like a key to a lock. So think about what kind of peg is going to fit in the hole of your environment. Maybe select a dog in the first place that is going to be better suited to the conditions of your lifestyle. Or if you already have a dog, think about the changes you can make to your environment in order to make more room for the dog that you have. Genetically, we need to be thinking about the kinds of dogs that we're breeding, and we all share in the responsibility of creating a demand for the kinds of dogs that are bred. So think carefully about the kinds of dog breeds that you're looking at bringing into your home, or the ones that you have in your community, and think about ways that you can continue to advocate for the breeding of dogs that are going to be better suited to the conditions and the expectations that we have in the 21st century. As for the self, remember to watch and listen to your dog. You'd be amazed how much information about how they're feeling and what their needs are is right under our noses. But we miss it so much because we're so busy looking at them as just a pet dog, not appreciating the true complexity of their individual nature and recipe of L.E.G.S. As the pet industry and the dog training and behavior industry continue to evolve along with our culture in light of these new understandings, we have to remember to be gentle with ourselves and each other as we work with our own L.E.G.S. We are literally trying to revolutionize the very concept of a pet and the entire concept of dog training, evolving towards something that recognizes the complexity that every animal has in their phenotype and all of their legs. recognizing that our dogs are in fact captive in the 21st century and that comes with a host of complicating variables. Creating cultural change is never easy, and we have a long history behind our misconceptions about dogs. We also are fully entrenched in our own experiences of the modern world, and we are going to need entire communities across the globe within the pet professions and as the pet-loving public to step up and advocate for the truth about dogs. In order to undo the many misconceptions and ill-placed attitudes and practices that we have about our pet dogs in our society, we're going to have to meet ourselves where we are with our own legs. We are going to have to be compassionate and patient with our own perceptions and attitudes and frustrations as we work to make the world a better place for us and our canine companions. The change we are creating is critical and in no way questionable as far as its validity based on sound, well-established science that we've had for decades. And yet, there's a lot of resistance in our mainstream popular culture to the concepts that we're introducing here. I hope that you decide to talk with your friends and your neighbors and your family members about the things that you have learned in this course to help us make the world a better place for dogs and those who love them. Certified family dog mediators are specially educated in the science of the L.E.G.S model and applied ethology as it relates to the welfare of the modern pet dog, and can be instrumental agents in helping you to get to the heart of your particular dog's struggles as a pet in the modern age. Working with a family dog mediator can be a tremendous relief for families, as they're shouldering the burden of societal expectations about their dog behavior as well. The entire approach of family dog mediation as a service model goes to the heart of the behavior problems at their source. Rather than spend time putting cosmetic changes on your dog that would be the equivalent of a new coat of paint and some light fixtures and upgrades to your furniture in your home, realize it's more important to address the crumbling foundation and the serious electrical and plumbing issues that are going on in the very structures of the home. Our dogs need for us to pay attention to the things that are going on beneath the surface for them, beyond the training and the tricks and the obedience commands that they can pick up in a training class or private lesson. Welcome to a new future for dogs and their families. It can be a whole new world for all of us.